So, Marty, your career can be tracked from mean streets to the Wolf of Wall Street. I guess that maybe says a lot about New York City.
Yes, well, it's the same picture, I think. I think they're all pretty much, but I mean, the heavier in New York, the really, well, it was just one of those things. We had to move to Los Angeles. Most of myself, my friends Brian De Palma and all, moved to Los Angeles to make films in the 70s. Whether they were Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, or New York, New York, or Raging Bull, actually, and King of Comedy. It was after King of Comedy that I came back to New York. Everything had changed in Hollywood. And so there was no way to get films that I was used to making in the 70s, made in the 80s, until about 1990 again, when Goodfellas was finished. And even then, there was some difficulty. But as far as the city changing, you see, I never left the city in my mind. I mean, I tried to when I moved to Los Angeles. I always tell the story. I had to learn to drive, and in Manhattan, we had to learn to drive. I grow my hair long. It was great. Everybody had long hair anyway in 1969, 70. I had been at Woodstock on the stage working with the film on that film. I wore jeans and cowboy shirts. I loved cowboy shirts, but I mean, to be flip about it, but it was really trying to find, maybe I can be a Hollywood director, but in actuality, the New York aspect and what I knew of life really was, the foundation was New York, and it stayed that way. Even though Taxi Driver was shot in New York, it was edited in California. Same thing. Raging Bull was mainly edited in California. But in any event, what I'm getting at is that I never noticed the difference. Is particularly in, everybody talks about New York City in 1975 being at its nadir, the lowest point, the Zabriskie point of New York history, which I don't think is true, but and that the governor said, governor to New York, these were the headlines, said, go to hell. No, that was go to bankruptcy. Drop dead. Thank you. Drop dead.
Forward to city.
Drop dead. And for me, I didn't quite notice the difference, but the film that came out of that was Taxi Driver. We shot it during that summer. I remember certain people saying, Marty, didn't you realize when you're standing on the sidewalk and there were mountains of garbage behind you? Mountains. Didn't you realize the city was just falling apart? I said, no, I just thought it was a garbage strike or something. This is the kind of thing that we normally, John Lindsay, remember all of that. So for me, I do notice it now. I do notice that I went to shoot, I'm doing a television, hopefully a series on called Rock and Roll, about the rock and roll business in the 70s in America. And I went downtown to shoot a scene down in Jersey Alley, Jersey Street, really small street down in Mulberry Street, literally, actually, I should say, where I grew up, actually on that pavement, actually in that graveyard around St. Patrick's Old Cathedral. And a number of friends came up to me, and they had these trailers. I'll make a long story short, but the trailers are annoying very often. They're big, they take up a lot of space, and it disrupts the people in the neighborhood. But the neighborhood has changed so much. It was Italians. Mainly, it was Italians from 1910 all the way to 1975 or 1980. Now there are different restaurants. You can have food from Thailand. You can have food anywhere. It was the neighborhood John Gotti was arrested in on Mulberry Street. He used to play in front of the social club. It's called the Ravenite. It's now a vintage clothes store. Vintage clothes means old clothes. Anyway. With the Bowery, was all of this. The change you see, if you ever see Mean Streets, it's there. Literally shot on that street. And I was in the trailer, and the guys came in, and Emma, my producer, she came in, and we were all talking about, isn't it something to be back in the neighborhood to shoot? Even though we were not shooting a film about that period, it was about something else, and it was about the glam rock scene that we were doing on another street right around the corner. And I felt really something, to come back and be back in my old area. And as I came out, it was about 7 o'clock at night. It was a Friday night, too. We had to shoot all night. And we were just going to begin. As I stepped out of the trailer, there were about 2 or 3 young people going by. I said, what are these trailers doing here? More of this HBO bullshit, for God's sakes. This is take over our whole neighborhood. I was devastated. That was my welcome. And I just stared, and then they got mad at me. I don't know what happened. All I know is that there were a lot of people and some waving, and it was shocking to me because I don't belong there. We don't belong there anymore. It's gone. And an old friend of mine was there too, who used to be with me all the time, and came by. He says, "You know, he said, he's not a filmmaker in any way." He said, "We don't belong here anymore." I said, "I know."